Back in 1979, the Australian rock band AC/DC released their hugely successful song, Highway to Hell. The opening and closing lines of that song are chilling. Living easy, loving free, I'm on the highway to hell, don't stop me. I doubt if the lead singer who wrote those lyrics knew that free love being a highway to hell was first written in the Bible. It was Solomon who said in Proverbs chapter 7, I saw a youth who had no sense. Then out came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. She took hold of him and kissed him, and with a brazen face she said, My husband is not at home. He is gone on a long journey. With persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with her smooth talk. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death. According to Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, adultery is a highway to hell. It can destroy lives now and for eternity if we let it. But while AC/DC shouted, Don't stop me, Solomon tries to do just that, to save us from the destructive consequences of adultery. Vicky is traveling this week, so join Kent Edwards and Nathan Norman as they listen to and explore the incredible, tempting, and destructive consequences of adultery in Proverbs chapters 5 through 7. Welcome to CrossTalk, a Christian podcast whose goal is for us to encourage each other to not only increase our knowledge of the Bible, but to take the next step beyond information into transformation. Our goal is to bring the Bible to life, into all our lives. I'm Brian French. Today, Dr. Kent Edwards and Nathan Norman continue their discussion in the book of Proverbs. If you have a Bible handy, turn to Proverbs chapters 5 through 7 as we join their discussion.
Solomon told us in chapter 1 of Proverbs that the first step towards successful living is the fear of the Lord. He reminds us that God is not a paper tiger. He is the holy sovereign of the universe and should not be ignored or dismissed, but reverenced and obeyed. In his wisdom, Solomon revealed how the fear of the Lord should influence our decision-making by exposing the snares Satan often uses to destroy us. Satan's first lure was to try and get us into the wrong crowd, to be part of a gang that could attract us with the promise of ill-gotten gains. The second snare Satan uses in order to destroy our lives is to make life decisions at the spur of the moment, rather than starting by establishing our life's purpose. According to Solomon, wise people walk backwards through life. They start by knowing what their destination in life ought to be, and then decide how best to move towards it. But Satan's third snare is much simpler. It is adultery. Nathan, you've been pastoring churches most of your life, and you're certainly in the people business. Have you ever seen Satan's sexual snare at work among God's people?
First of all, you just said most of my life, and I thought that's not true. And then I realized it is true. The majority of my life I have been serving in ministry. That's it is, and it's tragic every single time it happens. We've had good friends in churches we've ministered in, and the husband or the wife chooses to be unfaithful, and it just decimates their relationship. It decimates their family. It decimates their relationship with us. And typically, not always, but typically the one who has committed adultery walks away from the church or from God. And it's a terrible thing to see. I've had colleagues who have ruined their ministries because they have fallen into sexual sin. And to be clear, I think if a pastor sleeps with a member of his congregation, that's actually a crime, or should be a crime if it isn't. In the state you're at, but they've gone outside of the church and they've built this relationship, and it's ruined their ministry. Gifted people. Yeah.
I was shocked to read that in the survey done in just last year that the U.S. came in first place, or maybe last place, with a staggering 71% of people in the United States admitting to cheating on their spouses.
70. That's insane. I can't even wrap my head around that. I don't know. I guess I would want to know what's cheating, right?
Well, it was about adultery. So
okay.
It was clearly on adultery.
Surfing the web and they came across a picture they shouldn't have. Is that counting on the? But that number seems mind-bogglingly high.
But it does indicate how widespread this behavior is.
Yeah.
Why do they cheat? There was a study that came out from the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy identifying key motivations. Can you guess what some of them were?
Sex.
Yes, but why?
Their lack of intimacy within the relationship, stress in the relationship, a lack of not wanting intimacy, right? So if you're in an adulterous relationship, you don't have to have the same stakes as in a marriage, right? You're just in it for the physical moment, not for, now I have to take care of you and now we have to talk about our feelings, all of that. If they feel neglected, great. If one partner has greater or lesser sexual desire than the other, if they're really stressed out and, sex is how they manage stress.
I found it interesting that these studies also indicated that men tend to cheat more as they grow older.
Huh.
I think my guess is the study didn't delve any deeper than that. But my hunch is that as men get older, they tend to become more affluent, have a higher position in life, more authority. And I think that changes how men can perceive women. I mean, you mentioned earlier in a private conversation that you've been preaching on David and Bathsheba from 2 Samuel 11. We certainly see it there, don't we?
Yeah, it says in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful.
And we know what happens next.
Yeah.
He took
Should have looked away, but he didn't.
And sexual assault takes place. We hear about that all the time in the news, aren't we? There's a huge scandal in American politics right now about men, powerful men, abusing women and girls.
Yeah, and being connected to people who enable that.
Yeah. Wealth and power are potent aphrodisiacs. I think it can give people a sense of entitlement that can cause them to exercise their power in all the wrong ways. But the warnings of the father that the character that Solomon is speaking as in Proverbs 5 is very clear when it comes to adultery, isn't it?
Yeah, it says, "My son, pay attention to my wisdom, for the lips of the adulteress woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. Drink water from your own cistern. A loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breasts satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated with her love." Why, my son, be intoxicated with another man's wife? Why embrace the bosom of a wayward woman?
I just find it interesting that in chapters 5, 6, and 7, he warns the son again and again about adultery. I mean, you just read from Proverbs 5, but in Proverbs 6, he says something similar. "My son, keep your father's command and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Bind them always on your heart, for this command is a lamp, keeping you from your neighbor's wife, from the smooth talk of a wayward woman. Do not let lust in your heart after her beauty, or let her captivate you with her eyes." Why is Solomon beating this drum? Do not give in to adultery over and over again. Well, look at how he continued in Proverbs 6.
Yeah, he talks about the consequences here, right? So in the moment, it seems, okay, this is great, but what happens afterwards is never good. Proverbs 6:26 says, "A prostitute can be had for a loaf of bread, but another man's wife preys on your very life." Can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being... Actually, let me back up here. The NIV version says a prostitute can be had for a loaf of bread. Other translations, which I think I would agree with a little bit more, say a prostitute reduces you to a loaf of bread.
Wow. Okay.
But another man's wife preys on your very life. So the idea here is that, I mean, what's a loaf of bread go for these days, right? Like it's not that much,
Almost nothing.
Even though inflation, right? Like everyone can afford a loaf of bread, right? So a prostitute reduces you to a loaf of bread, and another man's wife preys on your very life. Can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched? So is he who sleeps with another man's wife. No one who touches her will go unpunished.
Wow.
A man who commits adultery has no sense. Whoever does so destroys himself. Blows and disgrace are his lot, and his shame will never be wiped away.
Wow. It's hard to know how Solomon can paint a more devastating picture.
No.
It looks great from a distance. He's saying it will destroy you. There is no full recovery from this.
No, you'll always have an asterisk next to your name.
Always.
Even couples I know who have chosen the hard route after adultery to move forward with their relationship, there is always that asterisk there.
Yeah.
There's always but you cheated on each other, or he cheated on you, or she cheated on him.
There's some members of my extended family that have fallen into this sin. Even one that is, as you mentioned, still with his wife. Whenever we're together, this thing lingers back in my mind. Oh, yeah, you're the guy who. You're the guy who. I'm glad you're together, but that lingers. People never forget. I had another member of my extended family who was unfaithful again and again, and he lost his wife, and he lost his next wife. He lost his next wife.
Wow.
At the end of his life, he was largely alone. With no money, surprisingly. There are economic consequences that come with that behavior. A man who destroyed his life because he could not gain control of himself in that area. But it affects the children too, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Having a stable marriage gives your children confidence. It is I have friends who they grew up without a mother or father, usually a father, and once in a while they'll run into, like they can meet who this father was, who they abandoned them. And it's almost all the time. They're like, oh, and I want to, this is what I want to say. You never taught me how to go fishing, right? You never, showed me, how to pick up girls or whatever. And that, that's legitimate, but it's the intangible things that you got to read deep psychological books to realize, what not having that stability in the household does. You learn not to take risks because you're just trying to keep everyone safe. The general sense of fear of relationships breaking apart. I mean, it can't be overstated what a blessing it is to have a mother and a father who stay together and love each other and show each other mutual respect. When that's broken, that really does hurt and shatter a kid's psyche, their soul.
And we pass it on from generation to generation, right?
Absolutely.
When our kids are wounded, when they don't have a model of a stable relationship between them.
Right. They're like, oh, so if the wife cheated, they're like, wow, that's how women are. They're all a bunch of cheaters. Or if there was the dad, and men are scum, and this is how they are. And if you're a guy and you see that, you're like, am I that too? Am I going to go down that route as well? Right. It's really difficult for them to experience.
I remember about the scandal that came from the Ashley Madison website. Do you remember that?
Oh, my word. Yeah. So That was the website that I can't remember the tagline. It was like, it's good to cheat or something. I don't remember.
When monogamy becomes monotonous.
Oh my gosh. It's just horrible. Oh, wait, no. And their other one was "Life is short, have an affair." Right?
That's true.
That was the other tagline. And I can remember seeing ads for it. I could just scrolling through, Facebook or whatever. Oh, here's an ad for this.
And there was a huge data breach, and all these names got revealed. The consequences were immense. According to not only on the families, as we talked about, not only on the people's children, because this is adultery, or at least your intent to commit it, right?
Right.
So when your name shows up and your wife and your children know you had the intent, you wanted to have an affair, that's devastating.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it also hurts the church. According to a blog post on Christianity Today, an estimated 400 pastors or church-related staff members were on that list.
400?
400. So think about what that does to a church. Think of what that does to the reputation of God. Do you remember what God said to David, even after he repented? 2 Samuel 12, verse 14 says, the Lord said to David, because by doing this you have made the enemies of the Lord show utter contempt for my name. The son born to you will die. 400 church leaders caused the world to look with utter contempt on God's name because they failed to live up to how a Christian leader of God's people should act. Oof. So how do we protect ourselves? We've got a lot of warnings, a lot of consequences. How do we protect ourselves? I think we can learn from Jesus on this. Do you remember back when we looked in the Sermon on the Mount on Matthew 5? He talked about this very subject.
Yeah, he says in 5:27 of the Gospel of Matthew, you have heard it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart.
So what leads to adultery?
Lust.
Okay. So my question then is, okay, Jesus, thank you for that. But how can we defeat that? And look at the strong words he gives.
Yeah. I think some well-meaning books that were out in the early aughts were kind of like, the phraseology I heard over and over was, oh, if you see a beautiful woman, bounce your eyes, right? Like, just don't look. I can appreciate that for what it is. And that's certainly the case in some extent. But I think that exasperates the problem in some ways of saying, women are the problem, or that encourages men to think that women are objects that I should avoid, right? Which is not the case. You need to I think you go the opposite route and say, this is a woman made in God's image, right? So if you see someone who is very attractive, rather than lusting at her or looking away lest you will lust at her, and guess what? She's already in your mind. I think, and I've adopted this practice. I think seeing someone who is beautiful, instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, a temptress," or something like that, to say, wow, acknowledge that is an incredibly beautiful woman. God, thank you for making this person so beautiful, and move on with your life, right? You don't focus on the person, you don't ogle them, but you're also not turning them into an object that, oh man, maybe I'm going to do something with this person. No, you embody them and you say, this is a person made in God's image. Praise God that you made someone this beautiful, right? And then move on with your life. I think that's a little more helpful than saying, I can never look at a person of the opposite sex ever again, right? Because you can't function. I think not focusing on people as objects instead of focusing them as people, I think that is incredible. That's been personally very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus makes just that point. Whoever looks at a woman lustfully.
Yes.
Not everyone looks at women or men or
Right.
Dogs are birds. I mean, you look at them, you can acknowledge their existence. That's not wrong. But when you look lustfully, and if that happens, if you, I think as Martin Luther said famously, it's not wrong for a bird to fly over your head. It is wrong to allow it to make a nest in your hair.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at it, at a woman or a man, and it creates a nest in your hair, what do you have to do? In verse 29, he starts giving us the answer.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell.
And notice that the consequence Jesus keeps mentioning coincides with what Solomon is telling us, right? That adultery leads to hell. Yeah. Adultery can destroy your soul. Yeah. And if something in your life is causing you to think lustfully, cut it out, regardless of the cost. Cut it out. If it's your iPad, throw it away. If it's your laptop, be drastic. Have software programs on it if you need to. Do whatever you do to make sure that you do not let yourself get into the lustful thoughts.
Yeah. And then I would even say if it's like a coworker, right? Change your habits, right? Yeah. Because now you're stuck with this person, right? Now you're having thoughts that you shouldn't have, but change those habits on how you're interacting with them. And again, something you said earlier, Ken, is really helpful and I think profound. Of course. But lust, I think, takes away a person's agency. When we look at people, we need to see them as people, not as means to an end. Lust sees people as objects, right? And so you need to, if you're struggling with this with a coworker or someone in your community or a neighbor or something like that you just can't get away from because of life, how do you cut that person out of your life? Well, you change the way you're thinking about them. This is a person made in the image of God. They have agency. They're not for me. They are for the glory of God. And change the habits on how you're interacting with the person, right? Interact with them in more healthy ways. It's
interesting that this temptation that comes, these lustful looks, in our society, I think a lot of it is encouraged by pornography, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I know we've talked on the show before that pornography, as early as 2007, there was Christian researchers that published data, and it was mocked and ridiculed until it was shown to be true. When you view pornography, it rewires your brain to see people as objects, not as persons, which is horrifying. Because when we treat people like objects, we become monsters. It is a massive issue. And not surprisingly, the biggest pornographic sites are in a lot of trouble, as they should be, for human trafficking and for refusing to take down illegal pictures and videos that were taken of people against their consent or who were underage at the time that they were taken. And, according to 2024 Barna research, the top 3 porn sites in the United States receive more web traffic annually than Netflix, Amazon, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and TikTok combined. The TikTok one is shocking.
Isn't that? Mm-hmm. It is everywhere.
Yeah.
It is one of the greatest temptations that Satan is using to destroy families, to wound the church, to take lives away from the Christ who died from them. Barna research tells us 78% of men in the U.S. use porn. 44% of all women in the U.S. consume porn.
Wow.
That is devastating. That is heartbreaking.
And we wonder, this is a bit of a field, but we wonder why we treat people so terribly, right? And if all that research is correct, that it literally rewires your brain to see people as objects instead of persons, I think social media has some huge issues, right? I think there's a lot of other issues out there, but pornography has to be high on that list if it's showing us that people are objects, not persons. Even just starting to objectify people that you wouldn't be sexually attracted to, but you just think of people as objects now. That's horrifying.
I'd like to, as we come to the end of this podcast, give people some practical advice for those who are really struggling with this issue. We can't deal with it all in a podcast like this, although Solomon wants us to pay attention to it. But there are a couple of books that you and I have discovered that are really helpful on this subject, aren't they?
Yeah. A number of years ago, which I would have said a few years ago, but I think this was over a decade ago, probably longer, which makes me feel old. Kent, you had suggested David Carter. That's Carter with a D. We will link this in the show notes. But yeah, the two books are Anatomy of an Affair, How Affairs, Attraction, and Addictions Develop and How to Guard Your Marriage Against Them, by David Carter, Carter with a D. And he also wrote Torn Asunder, Covering from an Extramarital Affair, also by David Carter. And those were really helpful. Kent had suggested that I read them. They scared me. But it really gets down into the heart and reason why people cheat, why they have affairs, and different kinds of adultery that they commit.
And he points out how we can easily see the early warning signs.
Yes.
And when we see the early warning signs, then we can escape.
Yeah, I forgot how many steps there are. There's a bunch of steps that lead up to at least a complex emotional affair. And let's say there's 10, maybe there's 8, but those there's a lot of steps, like 5-6 steps before it ever crosses over into, actual adultery. And yeah, if you see those, you go, oh, okay, let me cut that out. Let me cut that out. Like, so for example, one thing is sharing information with this person before you share it with your spouse, or things that you wouldn't share with your spouse, which, on the surface of things, you might be like, yeah, I should not do this, but whatever. And once you've done that, I mean, that's like really close to the affair level. And if you realize you're doing that with somebody with the opposite sex, like, okay, I need to stop this, right? Like, let me cut this off.
And another early warning sign was if you are slightly arranging your schedule so you can have personal time just to chat.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Give a small gift, maybe just a cup of coffee or a muffin or something. But there's a I know you'd like it. I just want to give this to you.
Rub. No, that's pretty far down. That's pretty far down.
But when I see the number of people who have fallen into adultery, it scares me to death. When I see the consequences of adultery on people's lives, their families, their churches, it scares me to death. And that's Solomon's point. In fact, I think we can end with what he said in Proverbs chapter 7.
He said, I saw a youth who had no sense. Then out came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death.
Let's take that advice. Let's run from temptation and cut lust out of our life, lest we join them on a highway to hell.
I trust that today's discussion of God's Word has been helpful and served as an encouragement to not just be hearers of the Word, but doers. Together, let's bring God's Word to life, to our lives this week. The CrossTalk podcast is a production of CrossTalk Global, equipping biblical communicators so every culture hears God's voice. To find out more about this educational nonprofit organization, please visit www.crosstalkglobal.org. CrossTalk just completed successful trainings in Moldova and Bucharest, Romania. Help us train the next generation of biblical communicators. All you have to do is click Donate in the show notes and make a donation of any size. You can also support this show by rating it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're enjoying it. Be sure to listen next Friday as we continue our journey through the book of Proverbs. You won't want to miss it.
No, Brian can't join us today. So I talked to Krista and she tried to schedule herself. She couldn't do it. And then I reached out to Brian and I asked him if he could. Now, I was very clear, Kent, that I said, Brian, you are our second choice. You are not the first choice that we went to. And he said no. No, they have something going on with the church. So
that's fine.
But I was very clear, you're our last ditch effort. You're our backup plan. Very reluctly pulled that trigger. Anatomy of an Affair, How Affair, Attraction, and Addiction. No, I can't read that small. I'm sorry. I'm trying to read this
Speaking of old.
tiny text on this thing.